everyone, welcome back to my channel, Sandria. Today is the 5th video in my makeup inventory series. We're going to be focusing on all of my eyeshadows. If I counted correctly, I have 29 palettes and I think somewhere around 200 singles. It would take forever if I swatched every single shade. We'd be here for hours. So I'm not going to do that to myself or to you guys. So instead, I'm going to try to get through these palettes as quickly as I can and just swatch a few of my favorite shades from each. And then hopefully this video won't be so long and I can add my singles in at the end as well. So let's get started. The first palette I have is this Wet n Wild Comfort Zone. I'm pretty sure anybody who has a beauty YouTube has owned this palette at some point. I know they reformulated and now they added mattes. I'm not interested in repurchasing it. One, because I'm not buying from Wet n Wild anymore. But two, this palette still works fine and I can always pull in mattes from my singles or another palette if I really need it. My two favorite shades are this green eyelid shade and then this like purple green duochrome definer shade. It's still a really nice formula, even though I've had this for a while. Next, I have 3 of these CoverGirl palettes. This True Naked Jewels was the very first eyeshadow palette that I bought that kind of started me on my makeup journey. As you can see, I've hit pan in this shade and this matte shade, and I'm very close to hitting pan in the gold and this black. I think I'm going to try to hit pan in all of the shades and then probably declutter this. It's pretty old. It's turning very powdery and dusty, and this blue, it goes on very nice, but it just kind of fades and turns muddy as you go through the day. But this blue and this green were the reasons why I bought this palette. There's the blue. You can see it's kind of patchy. Although, like I said, this is the first palette I bought when I first started getting into makeup. So it's like 3.5 years old at this point. I think CoverGirl's formula has gotten better. But I'm definitely going to be getting rid of this probably fairly soon. It's just not performing that well. And then I have these 2 other colorful palettes, this True Naked Dazed and this Full Spectrum So Saturated. They're very, very similar. Bright, rainbowy palettes. Again, I mean, I got this for all the colors, but I'll swatch this green and this yellow for you guys. It's a really nice yellow. I like pairing these 3 colors together. And this one, once again, the green. And I'll swatch this pinky one too. You can see these 2 greens are almost identical. I really didn't need both of these. Ooh, that's really flaky. I think I just picked up too much on my finger. But as with my blush and my highlighter, with my eyeshadows, I tend to be drawn towards certain colors, and green is one of those colors. This next palette is an I Heart Revolution palette called Mermaid's Heart. My sister picked this up for me when she went to London, because even though we can get Makeup Revolution here in the States, not everything is available. And I think this is one of the ones that you could only get over in Europe or through, I guess, Makeup Revolution's website, but she knows that I love blues and greens, so she got this for me. I'll swatch this shade and this shade and this shade. These are, I mean, my sister really, she knows what I like. This palette is really nice. I need to get more use out of it because I do love it. Then I have this Profusion Amber Eyes. This is like a dupe for Modern Renaissance. I actually also had the CoverGirl dupe for Modern Renaissance, and I like this one much better. Let's see, this shade, these two shades are very similar, Amore and Devoted, so I'll just swatch Amore and then Fearless. Ooh, I'm picking up too much on my swatches, but it's, I mean, I know it's a $5 eyeshadow palette. It's not going to compare to the ABH formula, but for a $5 eyeshadow palette, it's very nice. Sticking with the more drugstore palettes, this is my Revolution, the Emily Edit, the Wants. Mine came, this whole cover was broken off, so I had to tape it together. But here it is. It has not seen enough love. The cream is currently in my Pan Those Eyeshadows project, but other than that, I haven't used this a ton. I like the color Grateful and Side Hustle and Corduroy. Surprise, surprise, they're all green. Let's see, that's Grateful, Side Hustle, and Corduroy. Corduroy and Grateful, it's my favorite probably pairing in the whole palette. It's not a bad palette. It's definitely for beginners though. Then I have the Soph X palette. Oops. I don't like when they do this, but I keep it because otherwise I'm not going to know what the shade names are. I got this palette for this green, which is Pine Tree. This is Petrol, and this is Mixed Berries. There's Pine Tree, Mixed Petrol, which is pretty much the same shade as that Wet n Wild shade, and Mixed Berries is just a really nice purpley, like magenta-y color. I also really like to pair this shade, which is Sweet Strawberry and Pumpkin, like in the transition and crease, and then do like a lighter orange gold on the lid for a more sunset look. I have two BH Cosmetic palettes. They're baked eyeshadows. The Solar Flare, which is the more warm-toned orangey one. This shade, Photosphere. It's, I don't know if you'll be able to see that. It's kind of like one of those shifty yellow to orange duochromes. And then the shade Fireball. It's just this bright, intense orange. There you go. And the Aurora Lights palette, which is the extremely colorful palette, which I bought, again, this green Australis. I have this blue Polar. Let's do this pink Fluorescent. I haven't used this one enough either. Make sure that I'm getting in frame here. This was Australis. That's Polar. It's a beautiful icy light blue, and then Fluorescent is just hot pink. I have one Ulta Beauty palette. This is the Frida Kahlo palette. It's not a bad formula, but it's not something ultimately that I needed. I know I was really drawn to this yellow and this green and this blue. But I paid 30 bucks for this, and in my opinion, it's not worth 30 bucks. But I really do like that yellow. Next we'll do my Juvia's Place palettes. First I have the Zulu, a very colorful 9-pan palette. I basically got it because of this middle row, but the Juvia's Place formula is a really nice one. This is one of the few palettes that doesn't have any shade names, so this bright like, teal / turquoise, this bright lime green, and then the shimmery turquoise. Yeah, those are definitely why I got that palette. Next is the Deuce by Juvia's Place. This is probably, of the 4 that I own, this is probably my favorite. It's not the most versatile, but I like the green and this hot pinky purple. And then this shade Tart is a nice like pink kind of purpley duochrome shade. There's the green, the pink, and there's that shade Tart. Yeah, see, I really like the green with the purples and pinks together. It's one of my favorite combos, so I really like this palette just for that. Then I have the Festival. Out of my Juvia's Place palettes, this is probably my least favorite just because the color story is a little, I don't want to say confusing or overwhelming. It's just I have a hard time thinking of looks to go with it, but I love this shade, Abba. And then I'll swatch this gold, Odagwu. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, but again, there's nothing wrong with the formula or anything. It's just the color story is a little out there. It's not cohesive. Maybe that's the best way to put it. I don't feel like it's as cohesive as the other palettes. And then I have the Magic Mini, which really I bought for the bottom 2 rows, but this shade Faso is one of my favorites. And then Buzo. Faso is this purple. It's got just a slightest shift to it. It's my favorite color in the palette, but this Buzo is like a bright emerald green. And as you can see, I really like green eyeshadow. And finally, as far as more drugstore palettes go, I have 5 from ColourPop. The first, this is the She palette with the Karuchi collab. This is the very first ColourPop palette I ever got. My sister got it for me for Christmas many years ago. It looks muted in the pans, but on the eyes, I really like this orange shade. That is Duchess, I believe, if I'm reading this correctly. Duchess, and then I mean, this is a shade that ColourPop does over and over. This shade called Babe, it's just a peachy pink with gold, but I really do love this palette a lot, and I need to use it more. Then we have the Sweet Talk palette. This is probably, well, I mean, I love all of my ColourPop palettes, but this is definitely one of the most loved. I was actually working on this shade Work It in my Pan Those eyeshadows last year, and I didn't manage to hit pan, but you can, hopefully you can see, I've got quite the dip going on. I'm sure if I had been working on this for another month, I would have hit pan. But this one has the Super Shock shadow. Why am I doing that finger? Whatever. The Super Shock shadow, this shade Garden Date. I guess we're going back to this arm for a minute. This is the Super Shock. And this is Garden Date. Look. The Super Shock I really like to maybe work it in my transition and like ICYMI or Feel Free in the outer V, and then just put this all over the lid for a really simple look. And it's one of the looks I did several times when I was using this palette. Next, I have the Good Sport palette. When this came out, I was not intrigued by it at all. And then this past year, a bunch of YouTubers kept talking about it, and I believe this came out. This was either the 2017 or 2018 fall collection. So it's been out for a while, but all of a sudden I feel like YouTubers started talking about it again. And then I started getting FOMO, and once it got restocked, then I had to pick it up. But this shade Ebb is like this chartreuse, I guess you would call it. Green, like goldy green. This shade Sista. It's just a really good fall palette. And then I'll swatch this shade Trooper. I think I got a little shadow overlap in there, but that's okay. I'm very glad that I was able to pick it up. Next, I have the Bye Bye Birdie palette, which not that I don't like the colors in here, because I do, but I got it because it was peacock themed. I like the shades. I think Ariel and Gander, I think those are both Super Shocks. This one got all over I'll just swatch that one, I guess, since it got all over the lid. Ooh, that looks much different than in the pan. That, and I really like the shade Finch. I've only used this a couple times. I need to use it more. That'll be something that I'm going to say a lot about a lot of my makeup, because I have so much that it's hard to rotate through it sometimes. And then finally, I have the Misunderstood palette. I was very excited, I guess, to see this palette. It's a little more, in my opinion, colorful than a lot of ColourPop's palettes work at the time. I know the last year they came out with all the monochromatic palettes, but at the time this came out, I feel like everything that was coming out was neutral. So the shade Diablo, Forest of Thorns, and Facile. I'll have to start doing it on the back of my hand. This is the Diablo shade, Forest of Thorns, and Facile. It only has, well, it has 4 mattes, actually 5. This is a matte too, but these are the only 2 transition shades, but it doesn't really, I know that's a reason a lot of people didn't like this palette, but that doesn't bother me. I don't mind pulling in from other palettes. Finally, my more high-end palettes. I don't have a ton of these. I have this Lorac Shine Bright, which was Holiday from last year. I hit Pan and Haze because that was in my project pan, but the shade Atlantis and Spruce. And I'm going to swatch this Icicle shade as well. They're pretty standard formula, although I feel like they're not quite as creamy as the formula in their Mega Pro, but it's still a nice formula. I'm just not buying from Lorac anymore. That's okay, because these palettes are so big that I'm going to be working through them for a long time. The Mega Pro 2 Blue Quartz is mainly the reason I wanted this. I mean, well, I'm gonna do it for you. You can see, well, maybe you can see, I've used this quite a bit. You can see some little dips going on, but not anything, I'm not anywhere close to hitting pan on any of the colors. And then the Lorac Mega Pro 4, I got this because of Emily Noel. I'm sure you've noticed by now that I've got a lot of my makeup because of Emily Noel. And while I don't mind cool tones, there's something about these cool tones that just, they're not the greatest on my eyes, so I don't use it as often as I should. I'm not gonna get rid of it because I paid almost $60 for this thing. I'm not gonna get rid of it. I'm swatching the shade Moss and Peacock. It's not something I'm gonna declutter, but looking back in hindsight, it's not something I probably should have bought. My final 6. The Stila Blue Realm. You've seen this on my channel before for my monochromatic project pan. I bought it for this blue and then these 2 more duochrome shades. I did buy this on sale, and I'm glad I did, because while I like it, I think I would have been a little upset if I paid full price for this. This blue especially has so much fallout. The first time I used it, I just had blue, like metallic glitter all over my face. Next is the Sweet Peach palette. This is my oldest high-end palette, and it barely looks used because these are so tightly packed, but I used this palette probably 3 or 4 days a week for at least a couple months after I first got it, and it almost looks brand new. My favorite shade out of here is Luscious, and then I love Bellini too. It still smells good, but I think the formula is starting to change just a little bit. So I need to get more as much use out of it as I can, because right now I've decided I'm not going to be purchasing from Too Faced. So if I end up having to declutter this, I cannot repurchase it. Let's do my Born to Run palette. Nice and colorful, but again, I got it for these 3 shades in the corner. This blue, this darker blue Radio, this lighter blue Big Sky, and the green Wanderlust. I haven't used this, again, nearly enough. I keep hoping that I will pull a shade from here into my pan, those eyeshadows, but it hasn't happened quite yet. I have the only ABH palette I have is the Jackie Aina palette. I love this palette. I've only had it for a couple of months, but it's already one of my favorites. I love this shade Sponsored. It's kind of like this shade from Wet n Wild or this shade from the Soph X palette, but I think it's got more purple. It's a little darker. And then I love this shade Zam. Just a really bright copper. My final 2 palettes are from Colored Rain. I have the Queen of Hearts. I'll swatch Empress and Noble Woman. I mean, I got this because I know a lot of people on YouTube have this, and every time someone would use it, I always thought their look came out so beautifully that I think it was on sale, so that's why I got it. And then the Safari Rain, I got this because Kat from, what is it, Kitchen Stitch, she did like a review of this doing 7 looks, and it looked so amazing that I bought this and the Queen of Hearts at the same time because I believe when I was looking at this, the Queen of Hearts was on sale, so that's why I picked it up. But the shade Jungle, the shade Amazon Basin, and then I'll swatch line. Like, oh, I think this shade Lioness is a different formula. It's definitely a different formula than some of these metallics. It's much creamier. There's Jungle, Amazon Basin, and Lioness. It's kind of hard to see because I'm swatching on the back of my arm, but I mean, on your eyes, it just looks like liquid. Well, that is all of my eyeshadow palettes and the corresponding swatches of my favorite shades from all of those palettes. Hopefully this video wasn't too long, and next I will be showing you my single shadows.